All right, I'm going to call the meeting, the Curriculum Instruction Committee meeting for October 7th, 2020. I'm calling it to order, and we're going to start with public comment. Dr. Cuppett.
Yeah, we have one item. This is from Kelly Foster. It says, I have concerns about the number of instructional minutes the schedule allows for AP courses. My concern revolves around the topic of equity, which FCPS has issued statements on in their website. Those statements revolve around race. My concern is for students who are taking AP courses and are underlined, not receiving equal instructional time with other students across the United States in the underline. The AP test is unique because it is offered at schools throughout the country and abroad. Each student is expected to learn the same topics and are tested using the same exams throughout the country. In normal years, students would have received 400 minutes with their teachers each week. At this time, they receive 195 minutes and office hours, which may be utilized. I spoke with the vice principal in charge of courses at AP courses at Walkersville High School. He indicated this year's model will be more like an actual college course where they don't meet each day. However, college courses for chemistry and calculus would have 50 minutes of recitation meeting twice a week where students can get help with solving homework problems. This is lacking for AP students. College courses also offer office hours with instructors as well as teaching assistants. This is also not being offered. I've been told by some FCPS employees that nothing will change until at least January. I am begging you to take action now. Many AP courses only last for one semester. If you wait to act, then our students will not be able to pass the College Board exams. Kelly Foster. That's the only public comment item that we have received.
Thank you, Dr. Cuppett. There are no changes to the agenda at this time, correct?
None at this time.
All right. Board members, any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, they will stand as written. All right, so let's move into our presentations. We'll start with Striving Readers. Dr. Cuppett, take it away.
Yeah, so we'll also ask too that those folks that are not presenting at this time, you're welcome to turn your cameras off, the other presenters. That should focus us in on the presenter who's there. And I would like to introduce Shira Solomon to the public. Shira has been serving as the evaluator on our Striving Readers grant. And Jen Russo, who has been the program manager for our grant specialist for the Striving Readers grant, is available here as well. I do want to thank both of these ladies for really adjusting on the fly once the closure occurred in March. Many things changed in public education across the board, and the Striving Readers grant was certainly impacted in that respect. And you'll see that Shira will have information on basically what has happened, but this is a grant requirement to report at the end of the year. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shira and let her roll with it. Thank you, Shira. You're on mute.
Shira, you're still up there. Okay, good.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, I minimized my window to unmute myself. So
yeah, I'm not in the presentation. There it is, Shira. So you go into present mode. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody see the presentation? Okay. So thank you, Dr. Cuppett, and your team, especially Jen Russo, but all of the curriculum specialists and partners who have done tremendous work and done a lot of it to bring this project to fruition and to do so much with this large grant. So the key word in the grant really is comprehensive, and I found that to be the key concept in the evaluation as well. I have in this first section of the presentation a couple pathway models that we developed in the first year of the grant. These are simplified models for the purpose of presentation. They're much more detailed in the report itself. And these show at the early childhood, elementary, and middle school levels what is really a multi-level theory of action. At the early childhood level, the various activities promote the prevention of gaps, of achievement gaps, through these short and midterm outcomes. At the elementary and secondary level, again, this is a condensed and simplified model. The goal is to close those achievement gaps. And there are two primary pathways through which the grant activities press on those outcomes. And those are through an intervention pathway, and we're talking about tier 2 and tier 3 interventions there at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. An array of them. By one count, I had 22 different interventions, but it depends on how we're looking at it. And the other pathways through standards-based instruction and various professional learning and other types of resources, curricular resources that improve the quality of curriculum, of standards-based instruction for all students. So we're raising the literacy instruction for all students, while we're also assessing and providing more effective research-based interventions for students at tier 2 and tier 3. Implementation. Some of the major findings, some of which actually have come out since the closure. So I do want to assure you that data collection has really continued very well through the transition to virtual, beginning immediately in the spring. So a major finding concerning implementation is that at the early childhood level, approximately 40,000 books went to about 700 families. Now, several of the major Books to Families programs are presented here at their different age intervals that they primarily serve. And they're all very different kinds of programs. Raising a Reader circulates books through the schools. Learning Parties gathers a small number of families for intensive, repeated learning parties where they learn research-based strategies for engaging their children in literacy-rich activities in the home. And the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which sends books to the home for the youngest children. So these are several of the books to home strategies that together have really done a lot to put books in homes. And this graphic is just one piece of data that we actually collected since the closure. This is only for pre-K families, all of whom participated in the Raising a Reader program. And this data was collected while they still had the books in their homes. And it clearly shows that 44% of families had less than 20 books in their home, keeping in mind that they probably had 5 books at home through the Raising a Reader program. 30% of families had 5 or fewer books at home. So this may have been the only source of books for many families, or the primary source of books for a whole lot more families. So I think this one piece of data among very many really conveys the point to me that these programs really are making a difference in the lives of families. At the elementary, middle, and high school levels, we did a very comprehensive survey. It went to all schools last fall, and it really was about the state of implementation in their schools. Now, Striving Readers, as extensive as it was to support professional learning among specialists, literacy specialists, and also teachers, it was not intended to reach, to engage all teachers in formal professional learning. So we wanted to see the extent to which teachers in schools were aware of the various resources that the Striving Readers Grant had made available at their school. Some of those resources had only arrived there within, the previous couple months. Some had been there for a year already, depending on people's role in the school, whether they were a classroom teacher or a specialist. They might be expected to have a different level of acquaintance with it. So the survey tried to account for that. I also want to mention here that we had an extremely high rate of return. We had 9 out of 10 schools had teacher responses, and 8 out of 10 schools had principal responses. So we had a very great deal of data to depict implementation at the school level and the level of diffusion of knowledge and of material resources themselves. So to give a very bird's eye view, middle and high school teachers reported slightly greater access to the resources, including professional learning support, both formal and informal, than elementary school teachers. But in general, that level of access and professional learning hovered around 50%. Now, the pattern is a little bit reversed when it comes to implementation capacity and teacher efficacy. Elementary school teachers reported greater implementation capacity and efficacy than middle and high school teachers. Not by a lot, but again, we see those slight shifts in the patterns reverse when it comes to how well they felt that they could use these resources. There may be different explanations for this. I think one of the plausible explanations is that some of the resources may have been less different for the elementary school teachers than for the middle and high school teachers. So, for example, LLI Purple, which was introduced for 4th and 5th grade intervention, teachers are already familiar with the LLI program. So this is an extension of that rather than an entirely new kind of resource. So again, it's a lot of data on a lot of resources by a lot of people in different roles. So these are the kinds of inquiries we've been doing, and some of the explanations that we're pursuing. What are the big outcomes? What were the big outcomes after the first major implementation year? For early childhood, we see kindergarten readiness increasing at the Striving Readers target schools. In year 1, that was 7 schools, and in year 2, it was 9 schools. It's currently 9 schools. We also see readiness gaps narrowing between the target schools and other schools, and readiness gaps narrowing specifically for students with disabilities and English learners. So it ought to be pointed out that FCPS has one of the highest, I believe it was the 4th highest in 2019, levels of kindergarten readiness per the KRA statewide. So we do have a nice bar to meet, but we do have gaps, and performance in that first year narrowed the gap by twice as much as the grant performance target. So that's a really excellent outcome. It's very promising. Kindergarten readiness, again, we do see gaps. At the bottom of the chart are the student groups of primary focus compared to their counterparts, which are a ways up on that graph. So we don't see a huge amount of change in either set of groups, but the change is in the positive direction for students with disabilities, English learners. Unfortunately, even though there was no positive change, we still managed to decrease the gap. So that's a good thing. At the elementary level, we also, in general, don't see a ton of change, but students with disabilities and English learners, though they really start quite far down, the interventions, the Striving Readers resources do appear to have acted as levers to very significantly boost those outcomes and reduce those gaps, especially for English learners. At the secondary level, we see ELA proficiency increasing, but gaps persisting. We see much greater increases in proficiency, in ELA proficiency.
4 minutes till 10:20, right?
We see much greater increases in proficiency, but we do see even greater increases in proficiency in the students who are not FARM, not students with disabilities, and not English learners. So those gaps did not decrease, but we do see promising increases that are very substantial among all the groups of concern. And at the high school level as well, we see ELA proficiency increasing, particularly among FARM and English learner students, but among all students, which is good. So the current grant year is the last grant year, and it's actually an extension year. It's not a year 4. It's an extension of last year, basically. And we have some major modifications to both activities, which are focusing on implementation fidelity in virtual settings. So, of course, there are a number of modifications that go along with that. And also the stability of those activities as they transition between a virtual and in-person settings, because we may be going back at some point in the year, and the goal is continuity and stability as well as fidelity of implementation. The evaluation is more limited in scope, and it focuses this year in depth on one activity per grade band. From birth to 5, it has focused on a very promising professional learning experience. We recently completed an independent freestanding report on the English language and literacy series that focuses on the impact of a collaborative professional learning experience, because that early childhood level relies so heavily on partnerships. So this seemed to be an exemplar of efficacy. At the elementary level, phonics suite, which is an intervention, middle school thinking core professional learning has shown really promising results, as well as having reached in an intensive way a whole lot of teachers. So that is unique. And Achieve 3000, which is a systemic replacement for Read 180 at the high school level. And this year is the first year, last year, was the first year for that widespread intervention in place, so that those results will certainly be very different than the very preliminary results we saw in previous years. So that is the presentation I have for you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Ray or Jay, do you have any questions?
I have a few.
Okay, go ahead.
In the short-term outcome section for the high school, middle school, and elementary. Could you go through give me some context and detail of what one of those boxes looks like?
Are we looking at the design part, at the pathway models, the diagrams, or the outcomes?
The early childhood prevent gaps, and then elementary, secondary prevent gaps. One of the pink
Okay.
boxes.
Sure,
Um,
absolutely. Mhm.
About yes, teachers use research validated interventions for all literacy skills needs.
Certainly. So that would include Phonics Suite, would include LLI Purple. And basically the goal here is for elementary school teachers to get away from it to the extent feasible IIPs and move instead toward, instead of coming up with their own interventions to meet students' needs, LLI Purple is one of those interventions that is a research validated intervention and that meets the needs of students at those upper elementary grade levels. So the short-term outcome here would be students getting LLI Purple, for example, instead of an IIP or instead of part of their IIP.
Thank you. Slide 8, what has been done to increase the teacher access to resources?
Jay, at what level are you talking? Elementary, middle, high, or all of them?
About middle and high.
So I know that as we continue, Sue Ann Noggle here is available as well, can respond to, but we are continuing with the work in this now extension year that Shira was talking about with Dr. Carey's work. Sue Ann, you want to give Mr. Mason a little idea of the scope of what we're doing this year?
Sure. We've been providing professional development with Dr. Diana Carey, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes when I go through my slides. But also, we've made the resources available to teachers through Curriculum Now, as well as we've created a Schoology course with all the resources in it. So teachers can go in. They have 2 different ways to go in. It's ongoing. We're work in progress, but it's been very well received by our middle and high school teachers.
And then Mr. Mason, at the elementary level, this is the first year that we're implementing our Phonics Suite programs at K1 and 2 across the district. If you remember from a previous update, last fall, we started with about 9 or 10 schools. The feedback was super positive. We expanded in January to another large chunk of schools. And then, of course, in March, we had the shutdown, but we proceeded with providing those materials and resources to all teachers at the elementary level in K1 and 2. In addition, we were able to repurpose some of the money in the grant to add Launchpad, which is the pre-kindergarten version of this program. It's a component of the pre-K day. It's not a super huge part of it, but it is building that readiness in pre-K students going into kindergarten. So if that same survey was done again now related to Phonics Suite access and resources, we'd probably be in the upper 90s, if not more, because that is available now to all of the teachers of those grade levels. And then in the early childhood area, we continue to, although as Shira indicated, we kind of modified what we're doing at the pre-K because we're still in this virtual environment. Those schools still have access to all those, the materials and resources. So we would expect that if we were to survey again, that number would have increased. But we'll know that when we do our final evaluation for the whole grant.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And looking at the data on slides 13, 15, and 17, do we track our Black African American students?
We are not looking specifically at that. Our groups of concern are free and reduced meals, students with disabilities, and English learners. Those are the target groups that are that are the focus of the achievement gaps that we've been studying in this.
And Mr. Mason, that is the focus of the Striving Readers Grant itself. Those were the areas that we had to indicate and show information in. The grant itself wasn't targeting racial achievement gaps.
Okay. Seems like a flaw, but it's not my grant.
Well, and as you know, Mr. Mason, we track that data anyway in our general achievement monitoring. So I was not overly alarmed that was going to be a challenge as far as us as a district, but within the focus of this grant, it was narrowed to those 3 areas.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Ray, you have any questions at the moment?
I do. I have 2 questions. And one is really just, this wasn't a question before Mr. Mason just raised it, but although it's not a focus of the grant, are we collecting demographic information about the students, or are the demographics solely limited to the EL, students with disabilities, and farm? Like, if that's data that we wanted to dig into a little bit more, is it data that's available?
It is data that's available, certainly.
Okay. My other question was really just around, so I understand this grant has extended, we're in an extension year this year. Beyond this year, do we anticipate having additional opportunities to apply for funds to continue the program, to be able to continue offering the professional learning? I think the data that's been presented so far sounds promising, but my guess is we need to continue the interventions ongoing and continue the professional learning and development for our teachers, more than just in the 3-year grant period. So just curious about what happens next after the grant does officially end.
Jen, did you have any updates? So originally, Ms. Gallagher, we were hearing that there was going to be another wave of money associated in a similar vein to the Striving Readers coming from the feds. COVID hit. So Jen Russo will probably have the most updated information on that. Do you have anything, Jen?
Yes, we just had a meeting with MSDE this past week and found out that as of right now, there are no further Striving Readers funds going forward. Our grant period ends with the extension June 30th of next year.
And so, Ms. Gallagher, so then anytime you come off a grant, then there has to be decisions made about what can we sustain, right? So we will have a long-term commitment to Phonics Suite. That's all been, I will be requesting an increase in the amount over what I increased last year now that we're district-wide. We will maintain our relationship with Dr. Carey. I'm not sure to what level and what form we will do that for the high school level. The intervention programs that we have will continue to stay in place. I think we'll be able to sustain most of those. Now, Jen Bingman, I see that she's popped up her camera. They constantly evaluate what intervention programs we have and so on and so forth. So that'll continue to be part of the process. The one area where I think it's going to be a little hard to sustain the funding is going to be in some of those ECE related programs where we're doing outreach to the community and getting books in home. We'll certainly look at that, but you can never know. I mean, occasionally a grant opportunity will pop up that might fit with continuing some of this work. We always keep an eye out for that. And you guys know Doreen Bass is very good about scouring the landscape for different grants. But we were a little disappointed to hear there weren't going to be continuing dollars, because the direction that we were hearing from the state was when those federal funds come, they were actually almost doubling down on that 0 to 3 population. It was going to be very heavily focused on that earliest intervention and working with our families. And I guess maybe because of the circumstances that we're in right now, then that came off the table for us.
Okay. And I have a few questions also. So I just want to basically understand, this Striving Readers Comprehensive Literacy Grant Program is out of the U.S. Department of Education.
Started there and then passed through the states, right?
Okay. And Shira then comes as an independent evaluator to make sure that we're getting results. Okay.
Yeah, and in a grant this size, Ms. Yoho, it wasn't explicitly stated that we needed an independent grant person, but the state was anything with the size that we got 2.8 million, which was the largest award in the state. When we submitted our evaluation section of the grant, I said we need to go with an independent grant person, evaluator, because I knew that was going to be, and we actually, I think we got a perfect score in the grant application. And that in many ways engenders confidence in the grantors that the district is going to be monitoring very closely. And as you can see, Shira's super thorough.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have enjoyed in working with her is that evaluating this is a sophisticated process, right? This is not an easy, it's so many different stakeholders, multiple levels. And she in many ways makes it look effortless for us. So that was how that was set up in the grant, Karen.
Very good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I and anybody might watching understood the lay of the land here. And that does, I think that actually does give me confidence as well that we're not trying to cook our own books and that what we're getting is an independent evaluation that, we can take to the bank and build on. So one term that I see in there is called research-based. And I know how difficult it is to do research with human beings and children and all that. So could you talk a little bit about what that term means as far as then evaluating programs or when we decide to use a program?
Jen, do you want to talk about Essa evidence levels or anything like that? Shira, why don't you go ahead first, and then maybe Jen, if you have anything to add, we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm not, I don't have a hand in selecting any of the interventions or resources, but the way I understand research-based interventions is I am not the one affixing that label to them. I am completely taking it on the understanding that these specific interventions, and again, my conversations with the curriculum specialists have confirmed this, are ones, and also my read of the grant proposal itself has also confirmed this, that have an evidence base that is either recognized by the What Works Clearinghouse or some other federal formal recognition of the level of evidence provided for that specific resource. So it's not intended to recognize or take on their word publishers' marketing. It's supposed to derive from federal, state, or other official means of recognizing various levels of evidence, and presumably the level would meet a sufficient threshold for being recognized as a research-based intervention.
Jen, do you want to add related to the Essa evidence levels?
Yeah, we absolutely take a look at the Essa evidence levels anytime that we make a decision with purchasing an intervention. The 4 levels for evidence-based is level 1, which would be strong evidence. And there's definitions for each level so that we can make sure that whenever we are indicating what level it is, we're clear. And like she talked about, the What's Working Clearinghouse is a perfect place for us to be able to get that. It is evaluated outside of the company. And so it's not necessarily just taking what the company says. There's actually research that has been done, and it has been collected, and it is put together so that schools, districts can take a look at what it is and decide, does that work for our system? And that's absolutely the practice that we follow every time that we look at utilizing any resource with our students.
And Karen, to get to your earlier point, it's difficult to do research in the educational environment because if you think you have a program that has high efficacy, do we not give it to some of our students? And so that strong measure comes from the most rigorous research methodologies. And when we submitted the grant application, we had to indicate what Essa evidence level each of the programs or activities were at. I do think that the research base is growing quickly. because many school districts and State Department of Educations are engaging in this research to determine, is it a strong level or any of the other evidence levels. So that, as you're recognizing, Karen's going to take time because of the nature of education. But thankfully, we have at least enough resources to get us pointed in the right direction.
Good, thank you. I found that interesting. I don't recall knowing about the what's, excuse me, working, although it sort of starts to ring a bell. I know I had read the National Reading Panel literature many years ago, and it's maybe connected with that. The 9 schools, they're listed on, I think, page 7 of the slide presentation. Are they our Title I schools, or how were they chosen?
So the way that we prioritize, anytime that you don't do something for everybody in the grant, then you have to show your prioritization. And that was done based on percentage of populations of those 3 targeted striving readers areas: special education, free and reduced meals, and English learners.
Thank you. I like the level of response you got. That's always good. And I think my last thing is just a comment that's something that came to mind. Freakonomics, if you are familiar with that, they have a correlation between how many books are in a child's house. I see you nodding, so you may be familiar with this, and students' sort of literacy and or academic achievement. Not that the parents read to them, just that the books. I mean, we hope that that's being done, and I love the parties idea and teaching parents good, parenting skills. But just getting the books in the house may be right there serving a purpose and a service to those students. So I do love that, and hopefully that will be something we'll be able to find a way to continue. So I think that's all I had. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Shira. Thank you, Jen. We appreciate your support. And I do want to clarify, I did say earlier that Shira makes it look effortless. I can assure you it is not effortless on her part. I do want to thank her again because of the thoroughness. This is an evaluator who has looked and talked with us at central office, but has also been down in the level of activity that's occurring. And we just really have appreciated having her along for the ride. And she's provided a lot of perspective to us. So thanks again, Shira. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Puppet.
So you guys get to roam the planet. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you, Shira.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
And next, elementary social studies.
Yeah, so we're excited to bring you an update. We had shared secondary social studies at a previous time. And so Kim Day is going to come in chair. We have some things happening over the next couple of years. I'm excited that Kim has been very attentive to the landscape around us, because you're going to hear in the work that she's laying out here, not only an attention to the new social studies standards and the adjustments to that, but also the importance of equity in the work that we're doing here. And we thank the board again for setting direction with your equity policy and having that be at a forefront for us in the district, but as well as the idea around the flexible learning approaches that we need in the fact that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and her attention to the idea of elementary instruction being less in the future as siloed topic areas and more of an integrated approach. So you're going to hear that today. I wanted to thank Kim for that. And Kim, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks.
It's coming in now, Kim.
Great, thank you.
Yep, it's showing.
All right, absolutely. So thank you for having me today. I was unavailable last month. I had the opportunity to take my newly graduated high schooler up to New York City to live. So thanks for having me today, so that I was able to do that last month with him. Kind of exciting. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of what our past work over the last couple of years has looked like, what our current work right now is, and then our future work, which is quickly overlapping with our current work as well. So over the last 3 years, we've been able to update the curriculum resources for elementary social studies for all grades K through 5. And that with new technologies, with resources that come and go, obviously in curriculum, you're constantly updating resources. So we've been doing that, and we've been able to update all grades over the last 3 years. With that comes new updates to Curriculum Now. We changed over to the new sites, which made it a lot more streamlined for teachers, which was something that we knew that they needed, because the old sites had been, were getting cumbersome with lots of old materials and things. It was difficult for teachers to find things. It's very clean and easy to use now. For many, many years, actually, Dr. Phillips had instituted an elementary social studies fair before I came into this role. And we were having a hard time getting it off the ground. And so it was one of the things that I had really wanted to try and put some time into. And so we created a brochure to kind of get the word out. We did like a little bit of a media blitz in the schools, and we sent this brochure to all the schools, their oldest and only lists. And we went from, sadly we weren't able to hold the social studies fair this year, but we went from a registration from between 10 and 20, which is really where my max was kind of coming in, to over 50 for this year. So I was so pleased with that. And then of course we couldn't have it. So obviously that worked, and just getting some of the word out was what we needed to do. So I was very, very pleased with that outcome, and we'll have to see what happens for this year. I work in STEM as well, so I also oversee STEM, and so I work very, very closely with Dr. Horn in science, and then of course with all of our STEM leaders. And our STEM leaders, we have one leader per school in elementary, and we work with them in science, social studies, and STEM. So we call them the STEM leaders, but we really do professional learning, and we keep them informed in the most up-to-date science, social studies, and STEM. We meet with them 3 to 4 times a year. They are our voice into the schools many times, and similar to like a literacy specialist would be, or something like that. We need like a connection to our schools, and they're the voice out of the schools to us many, many times. So they help to inform our work. We use them as a lens for our work oftentimes, and they let us know what we need to be working on in all those areas. So that collaboration is extremely strong, and we continue with that. As part of that, with our STEM leaders, we help to develop a social studies, science, STEM field trip guide that is on Curriculum Now, which has before, during, and after types of activities for different field trips, and recommended field trips for the different grade levels that would be covered in those things. And we've aligned those with standards. And so the teachers were real excited to see that came out last year. And so that was a direct result of our work with our STEM leaders as well. As I said, there's resources that come and go systemically. Our current resources that we use in social studies, in elementary social studies, are really old, and so we're always looking for new resources that if schools have the opportunity to buy, to put those books into those hands of those kids, which is really what we want to do. Because social studies is based in literacy, and we really want our kids to be able to have as many books as possible. So we've been putting through supplemental texts through the review process that are on now the approved list. So schools have opportunities to put those nonfiction texts into the hands of kids. And we continue to do that as we always want to be updating our resources. So some of our current work, obviously, is in developing digital resources and courses for virtual learning. So what does that mean? The resources that are on curriculum now were developed for classroom use, right? Where you could be printing things for kids, where you could be having kids work in collaborative groups, where there would be lots of teacher support for difficult text and things like that. So you could just, it's different. Not necessarily better, though, I found, because our blueprints for our Schoology course have been, I'm so very, very proud of them. We just had to shift the way we're thinking about implementing the curriculum, and we've gotten amazing support from our teachers saying thank you for these blueprints. They are making their lives easier, which is always what I want to do, and they're also maintaining the rigor of what I really want for social studies learning. So are we still using primary sources? Yes, we are. We're putting in scaffolds for the teachers to be able to use with their kids so that they can use those primary resources. Are the kids still reading, writing, and thinking? Absolutely. But we're putting in the scaffolds for them. So we're really making that all these things are accessible no matter what your virtual model might look like. So they're off the shelf for the teachers to use, and we were putting everything into Schoology district resources so they can just copy them over, and then teachers can then, of course, modify them to meet the special needs of their kids. But some of the scaffolds that we're putting in is we're narrating all the slides that we are doing, so that if a student happens to miss a class, a Google Meet, they can still use that slideshow and be able to either have a read-write access to it, but we've actually narrated the slides too with some of that instructional background in there too that you wouldn't get from just reading a slide. We have developed an at-a-glance planning document for the teachers so that they know what they do during the synchronous virtual face-to-face and what they can do as kids are doing student work time. We created this so that teachers, given our virtual model where social studies on the sample schedules was listed for 3 days, so that's what we're doing. In the classroom might have been a little bit longer, but we have streamlined what we need to be doing with kids so that they're able to do that. And they are very, very thankful for that as well. I've always believed that if you kind of create something that's easy for teachers to use, they will actually do it, which is always a problem in elementary social studies, is finding times to do social studies. And our teachers are really creative in finding that time. But if I help them by creating something that's really easy for them to use, they're much more successful in making that happen. And I'm seeing that now. How do I know it's being used? Because I get like requests for things that that people want access to. So it's out there and they're very much using it. The slideshows that we have are for both teacher and student use. They have all the embedded instructional resources there for them. We've even created some of the Schoology assignments for the teachers, knowing that they have so much on their plates. They just need to modify them for their particular class. This is something that's always been around. There's an elementary social studies and science scope and sequence, which it's really difficult for any during a school day to fit in both science and social studies. So we do them kind of an alternate basis. And we've had that for years with science. The work is ongoing. I'm currently working on Unit 2. So, we are just staying right ahead of where the teachers are. But it's helping them to do the work that they need to do. And it's also maintaining the important social studies instruction that needs to be happening. So that is kind of what we're working on right now. And then our future work is, like I said, kind of starting to overlap with our current work. in June, the MSDE released a new framework for elementary social studies. And so the framework basically are all what we would call our objectives, the things that meet what we teach. And so I looked at that. I was real excited to get it. I looked at it. I did a preliminary alignment, and we found that there's some overlap in our lower grades, which is really good news because we might be able to use some of the current things that we're doing, in the future. There is significant change in 5th grade for sure, and then also in 3rd and 4th. But there are changes in every grade. So there's a lot of work to be done to basically create new curriculum materials for the new framework. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to form a work group starting in November to really dive deep into this new framework with me. We're going to evaluate whether or not we need to add additional objectives to the framework to meet our vision for what we want to be teaching students. So we can use the framework from MSD as our baseline, but there may be things that we feel strongly about that we want to also add to that framework. And we're going to need to identify any resources that we have currently that we can continue to use, and then also look at where our gaps are to see what resources may need to be curated or purchased in the future so that we can address these new objectives. Of course, then we also have to look and see, is there anything new on here, especially in that 5th grade area where professional learning would be needed, and we'll have to start developing professional learning plan and opportunities for teachers. We will, in the work group, develop a plan for curriculum implementation. It takes a very long time to create even one unit. And so it will probably have to be a phased in, especially since I expected to start the work in June of this year and work through the year. And I can't do that right now because we're trying to make sure that we can maintain current instruction. So, and that's statewide. Everybody's in that same situation. So we'll put together a curriculum implementation plan that is best for our kids, best for our students, or our teachers, and is doable. We are, after the work group kind of looks at all those standards, those objectives, we will present for approval the new elementary social studies essential curriculum in this coming spring to the board. And then we will form some curriculum writing groups in which we will start writing the new units for the new essential curriculum, develop that professional learning, and then hopefully we'll be able to start implementation in the fall. As you know, there's so many unknowns, and so I'm not going to nail us down on that, but of course I would love to start in the fall, but we'll have to see where our current situation is at that time. And that is the past, current, and future work that we're doing. Okay, I'm back.
Thank you, Kim. Jay or Ray, any questions?
Could you remind us what the significant changes are in the 5th grade?
Well, so current curriculum ends at the Civil War. So what is happening is 5th grade is currently like exploration, colonization, Revolutionary War. That is actually being pushed back to 4th grade. And 5th grade will be Civil War to current times up through. And so it's a little bit different. It's not as chronological, but more thematic. So it's a lot about government, civil rights, immigration. So these are all new topics that we do not currently address in our current standards.
Great. Thank you. That's it.
Ray, any questions?
I don't think so. I think the question that I have in my head, I haven't quite formulated it, but it's really more around like current balance of social studies content and curriculum during the virtual learning environment. And I have elementary age kids in my home, so I've definitely seen some of the work that your team is doing, and it's been great from what I've seen. But I also know that in that same social studies block, there's the social emotional learning paths and science. So in our virtual learning environment, just curious if you have any insight that you can share with us about how teachers in elementary school are able to, or have been able to, balance those needs in that short time block.
It is a short time block, and of course, every school seems to be doing it slightly differently. If I had developed a curriculum that was 5 days a week, the teachers would not have been able to do it. So because the sample schedule that was put out for virtual learning was 3 days a week for social studies and science, and then 2 days a week for paths instruction. And so, it was hard for me to give up those other 2 days, but also, and Dr. Cuppett knows this, I am a generalist, really, right? So I have worked in the science world. I'm working in the social studies world. I also have, I don't know if I should tell him this, I also have a master's degree in curriculum in elementary math curriculum. Like, I'm very much of a generalist, right? I'm like, I don't know if I just want to say that as Debbie, but I believe that all of the content areas are extremely important, and they all can feed off of one another, and you have to teach the whole child. So, and that includes social emotional. One of my first jobs ever teaching was health. I taught health to 7th graders. That was quite the experience. But, it's so very important that the whole child is addressed in our curriculum. And so, giving up those days was well worth it. And so what did I do? I simplified. I figured out where the priority standards were. I needed to, so you're not going to do this, that, and the other, but that's okay. Maybe that was a little fluff, right? So we're really drilling down into what is most important, what's the most effective things for kids, so that we can still cover all the standards. We're still doing all the standards. We're just doing it a little more streamlined. And that way the teachers can take those other 2 days, do paths as well. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but because they do have 2 days to do the social emotional. A lot of them are only kind of doing 30 minutes. So that's why we put in some of those extra scaffolds for kids, so that they can also access things on their own. Not that they're teaching themselves. They have the resources to access the curriculum.
And Kim, if I can just add to, I think you said it really well about there's a lot, and looking at the priorities and simplifying. I think the other thing we're always looking at opportunities to do is integrate. So, when we think about the concepts in social studies, particularly as the content we're talking about, there's so many opportunities for integration in what you're presenting for children when they're reading material, and how you're bringing in literacy content and literacy standards when teaching social studies. And as in everything, like our standard banner could be, it's easier in a person-to-person world, harder in a virtual world. But I do think that becomes one of our greatest tools when we're trying to give our best of everything, is looking for those natural opportunities for integration.
100%. And like I said, social studies is literacy based, right? I mean, it really, really is. So we need to be teaching kids how to read primary sources, how to analyze them, how to write about them. And so those are all opportunities for that language arts integration that that even if you don't finish it all within your social studies time, believe me, it's well worth it. And I know Jen agrees with this, that, reading social studies and writing about social studies and talking about social studies are all really important in building a literate, child.
And the beauty of elementary school is we basically have our own group of children all day. So you have the flexibility to play with that, and to say, well, this morning, and, it doesn't have to be 8 to 10 is reading, 11 to 1 is math. Like, we have those opportunities to cross over. And that's really when, that's like the beautiful orchestra of instruction is.
And Jen Ralston and I have had many conversations about that. We have started the work of really trying to figure out how we can even make this more transparent to teachers, so that they see that they can do that. And we're continuing that work. It has slowed a little bit, not gonna lie, because, our focus is on virtual learning, but I think everybody understands that. But, it's still something, it's a high priority for both of us.
Yeah.
And of course, even in full in-person, getting science and social studies in was always an issue anyway, as they well know. And I totally agree with you. As a language arts teacher, my last, 6 years, because I love social studies and science, but I always tried to, whatever, the other teacher, the other half of their day teacher was doing, I tried to incorporate that in the language arts, and that's where you really get some wonderful reading things. And you're so right about the connection, because I learned a lot looking at middle school resources for document-based questioning and AP history. I've talked to teachers that teach that, and they basically have to teach kids how to write, an essay. And so they are very, very, very connected. I'm glad Jay asked the question he did, because that took away some of my thinking. I'm looking at curriculum now. It really looks great. I wasn't able, right now, the field trips, there's no link available yet. So could you talk about what are some resources that people will be able to find there?
So yeah, the field trips is on the homepage of curriculum now. So not in a particular grade level, but it's right on the homepage towards the bottom. And then there's a spreadsheet of the different grade levels. Oh. So you can see that there's tabs for each grade level, and then listed suggested field trips, and they are aligned with the units that we teach in social studies and science. And then and there's links out to the resources that any teacher might need to organize the field trip. So who do you call? How many people can you bring at a time? Where might you have lunch? Is it ADA accessible? As well as activities, instructional activities for the kids to do.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for that later. There's a lot on that homepage, so I appreciate that. So I'm trying, it's so funny, because my children are all in their 30s, now getting to their later 30s. When they were all in 5th grade, we went to Gettysburg. I know I went twice and learned how to amputate a limb. It was fascinating. Park ranger demonstrated that. And then my husband got to go with our youngest daughter. I don't know what he learned, but so now the pendulum swings back, and not that they'll necessarily do that, but so I'm just wondering, I know 4th grade now is very focused on Maryland.
Yes.
Will that focus stay?
So the 4th and 5th grade will be American history, kind of, and then in 4th grade it will be a mixture of the Maryland history and the U.S. history. So they'll be learning about U.S. history, but then have a focus in Maryland as well. So it's going to be really interesting, because right now, as you know, 4th grade is U.S. history, but through the Maryland lens. Mm-hmm. And then 5th grade kind of just does U.S. history. I don't know why it was like that, but that's the way they did it. So now we will learn U.S. history, but also understand how Maryland fit into that. So if they're learning about the Boston Tea Party, they will also learn about what was happening in Maryland during that time. the Chestertown Tea Party. So they'll see one event from the U.S. perspective, but then also see how Maryland fit into that.
Okay.
And that's through 4th and 5th grade. So they'll also get Maryland history in 5th grade as well.
Okay. All right. That kind of keep it spread out a little because they don't learn it the first time. We know that. Is there any thought to doing regions of the country? I know that was always something a lot of other places do regions, and we tended not to.
Yeah. So right now in 3rd grade, I have there's a unit about U.S. states where it's called Road Trip, and the kids actually do research about a state and they learn about the regions of the United States. That's current. Because I felt like, gosh, what kid doesn't want to learn about the United States, right? Like that's something that they'll take home and remember. So we do regions currently in 3rd grade when we do the state research. That's another great tie into language arts is the kids are doing research, in every grade level. So in the new standards, it still might fit into 3rd grade. 3rd grade is one of those grades currently and still is with the new standards that is kind of in the middle. It doesn't fit into that mold of 1st grade, 2nd grade where we learn a little bit about geography, we do economics, and then in 4th and 5th grade it's like U.S. history. 3rd grade is kind of in the middle, and it tries to do both, and which is what we're doing right now and is what they're doing in the future too. So we'll see. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do regions. I think one way to do that is when you learn about indigenous species across the country. That's a great way to learn about the different regions because they used the environment to survive. And so that's how you can learn about the different regions by learning about indigenous species across the country. So I'm hoping that might fit in really nicely in 3rd grade.
Okay. I see opportunity cost is still there. I'm so that actually comes up periodically, but I remember teaching opportunity cost and thinking whoever uses this terminology, and then it comes up. Something you just said, doggone, it left me. So, oh no, I know what I wanted to ask. And so more, I hate to say, are we going to get to a little bit more of the nitty gritty, not so rosy sides of history and what happened in the past? I mean, I feel like slavery started to be a little bit downplayed. The consequences of exploration, that it wasn't all happy, and to the indigenous people, is that coming in or coming back?
Yeah, they have a lot of, in the new standards, they have a lot about equality, freedom, and that they use a lot of terms about freedom. Even in kindergarten, they talk about what it means to be free. And so it's in general terms, not super specific, but I think there's so many opportunities when you're talking about some of those concepts of equality and freedom, and what does it mean to be free, and who is really free, and where are our freedoms limited. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to be able to look at some of those topics, those tough topics, especially through that lens.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Hearing nothing?
Hold on. Just wanted to, since it's Kristen's first meeting and just joining us here at CNI, and that we stole one of my favorite elementary school principals. I've been at Ballinger for 9 years now with all my kids, I think, maybe 10, something like that. So Kristen, could you fill us in on what your role is here with CNI and where you are?
Well, gosh, Jay, after a nice introduction like that, I could never say no, of course. So yes, I have stepped into the role in central office as one of our 3 elementary directors. And so my role here really is to listen in, stay in touch with what's being shared from our curriculum department with our Board of Ed, and be hopefully somebody who can lend an elementary perspective as needed in terms of what's happening with our principals in our schools, right now I'm in the perfect place to do that because much of me still feels like a principal. So I feel like I'm still very connected to that part of that role. And so it's a perfect place for me to start to learn some of both what I'm learning as more of my systemic lens with what I bring to the role, which is that school-based perspective. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Just a reminder for the public, the role of which instructional director here is at which meeting is often a function of the agenda. So if we were here discussing dual enrollment, it would probably be Kathleen Chappelle. So we rotate those instructional directors on an as-needed basis. So we're thankful to have Kristen here with us.
Kevin, I thought it was like the favorite director got invited to this one. Was I misinformed?
Evidently, there's a lot of that going on right now.
When you're invited, you're always our favorite.
And I do want to remind the committee that of our time. We're about 10 minutes past our pacing, but and we still have 2 presentations to go. So Karen, do you want to move over to Jen now for elementary LA? Okay.
Sorry. I thought we were basically 1, but I guess see there are 2. Yep, let's
Yeah.
move on. Thank you.
Yeah. So while Jen's pulling her presentation up, I do want to thank her for being a part of our team, even though she's been on our team for a short period of time here in Frederick County Public Schools. She's been making a very positive impact. And we heard a lot of that in our Striving Readers presentation. And as she continues now, she's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and where we're headed. So I'll turn it over to Jen.
Good morning.
Jen, yeah, I'm not seeing the presentation just yet.
It's coming up.
Is it? Okay. Oh.
Do you see it now?
Yep. Good to go.
Okay. So good morning. Give me a second here. So the vision for elementary language arts is to provide evidence-based comprehensive literacy instruction, and this is reflected in our updated ELA page on Curriculum Now. Throughout this presentation, I will reference components of Essa's definition of comprehensive literacy instruction, and then provide examples of how we are ensuring our ELA curriculum instruction and assessments are comprehensive. So this first component discusses the explicit and systematic phonics instruction. And we have implemented, as Dr. Cuppett mentioned, Phonics Suite in K through 2 across the district. This is whole group Tier 1 instruction. You see the programs here. We have Launchpad in pre-K, Countdown in kindergarten, Blast in grade 1, and HD Word in grade 2. In kindergarten and pre-K, this includes explicit and systematic instruction in phonological awareness. Our small group instruction has differentiated instructional approaches. It includes differentiated language and literacy instruction, and it incorporates the science of reading. We have recently purchased decodable text last year for grades kindergarten and first grade in all schools. And I believe our Title I schools received additional decodable text. This component of comprehensive literacy instruction is about assessment. And we have implemented our universal reading screener and training about how to interpret that data. It assesses the early literacy skills of phonological processing, the alphabetic principle, word recognition, and oral reading fluency. We are also working on updating our reading and writing performance tasks in grades 3 through 5 to align with the new MCAP assessments. We are also implementing oral reading fluency assessments with retelling in grades 3 through 5.
And Jen, can I just remind the board, we had shared this, I think, earlier at CNI, but the MCAP will now have at the third grade level an explicit assessment of phonics understanding. So that will be a part of that assessment. We would have actually had that in the spring if the assessments would have proceeded, but they will be available in the fall. So we'll have that as a measure, a part of our overall reading measurements.
And to build the capacity of our educators, we've implemented some professional learning, district-wide professional learning on the science of reading, which you can see on the homepage of our Curriculum Now site that has been updated. This past summer, we worked on that. And you see professional learning for literacy specialists. We had our national literacy presenter, Dr. Mary Dahlgren, present at our December literacy specialist meeting. In fact, we've had over 400 educators in FCPS enroll in the LETTERS course, the Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And our early childhood educators are also participating in an early childhood LETTERS course this year. Approximately 40 administrators have enrolled in our LETTERS course for administrators. This is exciting work. And for virtual learning, we have created Schoology Blueprint resources. The work began in our summer curriculum writing workshops, and it continues to this day. We are continuing to write those resources for our teachers. We also implemented district-wide Lexia Core 5, which is a computer adaptive reading program in pre-K through grade 5. We were fortunate to be able to prepare for Q1 by videotaping phonics suite lessons in the event that we were in a hybrid situation and we did not have concurrent learning where students would be able to engage in that synchronously. Any questions about our updates?
Jay or Ray?
What here is most helpful to our students with dyslexia, decoding, and dysgraphia?
All of it.
Could you restate the question, Jay? What was the first part? What
included in the presentation is most beneficial to our students?
Well, as Jen says, everything is truly a strong answer in this respect, that we are trying to build from the get-go systematically and explicitly the skills that kids need. And we know that kids need different things when they're learning to read, but we believe that all kids need the strong foundational skills. And that's why we were excited to even add Launchpad at pre-K this year, because that's a group of students who inherently are a little bit less ready for school. And we have such great outcomes for our kids in pre-K and even the extended full day pre-K, it's even greater. But to build those solid foundational skills at K1 and 2, our goal is that we probably would have fewer kids having reading difficulty. And that's why we invested heavily in the Phonics Suite program for that explicit systematic instruction. And Jen's focus on professional learning has been building capacity. I don't know how many teachers I've talked to who have gone through the first 4 units of the LETTERS course who just raved about their own knowledge base has been increased so much over than what they maybe had learned in their undergraduate. So that, again, empowering teachers to have the greatest toolkit available to help all kids is where we're going with our base program. And we still have our interventions, but our goal is that fewer and fewer kids would need to access those because we built such a strong foundation in our base program.
And I see Miss Bingman here, and she's one of our data specialists. When I joined the board almost 2 years ago, this is one of the areas that was high focused. A lot of parents coming in, students coming in, making public comment added some additional monies. Do we have any data to support what improvements have been made?
We have really begun to really dive into our data in that area because one of the things we've watched with kids with intervention specifically, we monitor their performance series. Last time when we presented, we talked about the performance series, which is a third-party valid diagnostic assessment that allows us to see where students are performing. And we utilize that to see how students move when they're moving through an intervention and how their progress is occurring. And so that kind of really helps us monitor our interventions. For our students that are in our core program, what Jen has talked about with regard to the comprehensive look of what we've done is really to help us to look at what are we doing with our earliest learners, how are we instructing them, and then how are we going to monitor their progress like you're asking. And so that DIBELS assessment is really going to be our monitoring of the data to see how is the impact occurring and what does that look like. And so we did that assessment last year in kindergarten and first grade. We will do that again in kindergarten, first and second grade this year. And so that is the piece that we're really utilizing. Last year, it was new. I will say that, it was an assessment that teachers hadn't been given before. And so they had training last summer. They practiced it before they did the administration, and they're getting better and better at it because it's one where you have to listen to students. You actually have to hear the way that they say the sounds. And so I feel like we're getting to a really good place where we're going to have really solid data that can answer your question, Jay, which is, do we have data to show that this comprehensive plan that we put in place is making a difference? And the work that we've done in looking into our performance series data with intervention and with our work when we looked at MCAP previously and saw our gains in ELA, it's making a difference. But again, our DIBELS data, and I think depending on when we have our strategic plan, in the strategic plan and for goal 1, there's a measurable goal specific to DIBELS data. And so we're going to be doing that presentation this school year. And so we'll do a deep dive into DIBELS data and into different student groups and how they're performing and a comparison with last year to this year. And so you'll really get an in-depth look and you'll really be able to see what impact has all this work had.
Great. Thank you very much, Jen.
Ray, anything?
Nothing from me for right now. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. I was thinking back when you said there'll be a phonics component to MCAP. It seems to me MSPAP or MSA, one of the previous iterations, also had that. It's kind of vague because it's been so many years. So again, bringing that back, which I'm glad. I think there's a lot of research, a lot of evidence. Obviously, it's a good thing to do. Can you speak to, since I'm not at all familiar with MCAP, having left before that was instituted, how you said 3rd through 5th grade, the performance tasks are going to be redone to align with MCAP. Can you talk to what that realignment might look like?
Yes. The MCAP is slightly different from the PARCC assessment in that students are, first of all, it is designed to be computer adaptive eventually. And so students will read a piece of literature and then respond to some comprehension questions. But then there is a writing component where students will write either to inform or to will write an opinion or will write a narrative, and it will be based on the information that is in the text. So that's different from PARCC because in the past, PARCC was not specific to a writing purpose. And so our performance task will need to realign for that writing component.
Thank you.
And I do want to share along that line, one of the things that we always do is we actually do an analysis of our local assessments, like the one that Jen is talking about, our performance tasks. And we analyze student performance based on their student performance on the performance task in comparison to how students do on the MCAP so that we can make sure that our assessments are aligned, because we do want to make sure that how we're assessing throughout the year is aligned to the state assessment. And so, and we give that information to the curriculum department and they utilize that information to make changes. They go back to their curriculum team and they make adjustments And it has really helped to strengthen our local assessments as we make sure that we're preparing students for understanding the standards and preparing them for MCAP.
And thank you. I'll make an editorial comment here. You know, since obviously we're always adjusting to be able to prepare our students well for the state test, we just have to keep hoping that the state test is assessing quality components. And it does sound to me like maybe we're finally starting to get there. MSPAP, as some of you will remember, you had to be able to write well. The students had to be able. We had anchor papers all over the classroom, and then that need to be able to do a well-formed paragraph kind of went away with the next iterations of state testing. So I don't think it's a bad thing that it's back. It does put a lot of onus on the students and the teachers to be able to hone that skill, but that's not also a bad thing at all. And I think the last thing I just want to say is I did attend one of the letters workshops, and it was fascinating. It was one of the things that made me want to go for about 2 seconds back in and teach and do things right and better. But it also, my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, says dree instead of three. And I learned in letters why they showed how sounds are made. And it's like, well, that makes perfect sense now. It's just where she's putting her tongue. So it was very, very interesting and very informative. And I could see how teachers could immediately take that back and apply things to their classrooms. So thank you. That's all I have. Back to you, Dr. Cuppett.
One more question. Seems like we're kind of focused on our struggling readers in this virtual learning environment. How are we challenging our highly abled learners, and what are we doing for our students in the middle? How are we trying to connect with them?
Right. So our
Is the cat gonna talk for this part?
Oh,
no? Okay.
She's just always here, so I ignore her.
Jay, she's a fixture in all of our departmental meetings. That cat is. So I didn't even faze me, but I know it's probably first time being introduced for you. So
it's not the first time I've seen an animal in a virtual meeting. They're making all kinds of appearances these days.
Animals, children. Yes, I'm bringing her into the office when I come back. So no, we were fortunate to the Lexia program is computer adaptive. So it really does help design instructional activities that meet students where they are and then takes them further. So, a third grade student, for example, has access to more advanced content in the Lexia program because it's computer adaptive. And then we encourage when students finish that program, which we've had a few students in 5th grade actually complete all of the units, which is a good thing because that means they are a fluent and, very excellent reader. So we encourage them to access text, electronic text. We have, we're fortunate in FCPS to have our students have access to a lot of electronic text. Even if they can't have a book in their hand right now during this time, they still have, we're encouraging teachers to make sure that they're reading and writing about what they're reading.
And I'll add, and Jen, I don't know if we've had an update on this, but the Lexia folks realized pretty quickly that they had this segment of students who were completing 5th grade early. They were just getting through the material so quickly. So they are developing now supplementals to kind of build on the top end of that. That was in their roadmap. And of course, then COVID hit. So I'm not sure if they diverted resources over just to making sure that they'd be able to keep up with the demand for Lexia. But that is one of the things that eventually will be added to us as a district so that we have more, in other words, kids don't ceiling out too quickly.
I'm sorry, Jay.
I'll just finish with one thing. And for those that think we are only using electronic text, I know that all of the libraries were emptied out last year. And then when we had our pickup this year, there was all kinds of books included. So kids have been given tons of reading materials, books to read over the summer and to begin the year. So, and I do appreciate every day the reminder to read every day for 15 to 20 minutes.
Yes.
And then my question I thought of this, what are we doing to get more diverse literature into the hands of the students and the teachers?
Right. I have recently approved a list of books that some teachers have requested, some diverse titles to be pushed out in instruction. So we are making sure that our textbook approval lists have diverse titles.
And Karen, to follow up on that, although Mary Jo Richmond, our supervisor of media services, is not here, she's been working with her media specialist for the last couple of years. And actually, I don't want to misquote exactly this, but this year, their media collection development plan must include this targeted approach to increasing the diversity of perspectives in the media center. So they actually had to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and make sure that they were allocating a certain amount of funds in the purchasing to build out their collection. So again, this is one of the times that we can thank the board for the direction of the equity policy, because that is now translating into these very actionable, concrete steps. And that's just another example of how our team is supporting that work.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. And I know Mary Jo would do a wonderful job, and I appreciate that the libraries are there and the media specialists have a key role in. I was a library aide for 1 year after I got out of college, and one of my main jobs was to just recommend. So I know I read a lot of books just so I could recommend, but that was me. So that's good. But I want to see them get into the hands of the teachers where it's explicitly then being, and the teachers understanding the role of diversity in literature. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think unless there's anything else, I think we can go to our last presentation.
Thanks, Jen. Have a good day. Appreciate you presenting. All right,
Thank
Sue
you.
Ann, we're up for secondary English language arts. While she's pulling up her presentation, go ahead and try to share there, Sue Ann. I did want to thank her and her team I'm always thanking our folks because they're doing such great work. But the work that they've done around the standards over the last couple of years with Dr. Carey, as well as the supporting of virtual learning, are two areas that I think you'll hear some great highlights from. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Sue Ann. Welcome.
Thank you. And thanks for allowing me to spend some time with you this morning. I'm going to talk first of all about the revised curriculum resources. I'll start with middle school and then move to high school. So what we did, this is like how we spent our summer vacation. We updated our learning cycles. A few years ago, we moved from curriculum maps to learning cycles based on our work with Dr. Carey, where the whole idea of the learning cycle is you keep going through cycles and cycling back through the standards. So you don't hit them one time, you hit them multiple times during the course of a year. We also identified and created additional resources to support those cycles. And then we did some work with Tier 1 intervention resources for general classroom use. That would be like scaffolding, graphic organizers, ways that we could personalize the education for students. We did them not only for reading, writing, language, but also for behavior. And we infused those into the cycles as well. We revised our benchmark assessments to better mirror MCAP, as Jen was talking about. We made sure we had a good balance of informational text that students had to read and then respond to, and the same thing with literary text. So we want to make sure that we had a good balance that looked like MCAP. And I will tell you that some of our teachers are involved in writing questions and working with MSDE on MCAP. So that's always a little helpful too. And we had some of them work with us this summer. We revised our rubrics, and this is for the first time in a long time. And we made them very standards-based and very task-specific and very grade level specific. So now we have a 6th grade narrative rubric, a 6th grade informative explanatory rubric, and a 6th grade argumentative rubric, and we have those throughout all the way through grade 12. So that's our teachers asked for it. We had some of our teachers use them during the spring, and the kids loved them. I mean, they thought they were great because they knew exactly what they needed to do to improve. Also, we revised all of our Schoology blueprints for middle school. So we have blueprints in Schoology and the blueprints in are like resources that are available for each cycle. Teachers can just pull and put into their own Schoology courses. And we did that in grades 6 through 8 as well. We were busy this summer. High school, and that's grades 9 through 12, as you already know. We revised our learning cycles. We had started with the learning cycle process in 9 and 10 the year before. This year we added, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We have year-long English 9 and English 10 classes for students who need reading intervention. And we use Achieve 3000, which was mentioned in the grant, in these year-long courses. So we spent more time infusing those Achieve 3000 reading intervention resources into our cycles. And then again, we revised our benchmark assessments to better mirror MCAP in grades 9 through 10. Then 11th grade has kind of just fallen by the wayside the last few years. AP Lang is now an option. Teachers were kind of doing whatever they wanted to with English 11. This year, however, we took English 11 and we created learning cycles for it. So now it matches 9 and 10, or really 6 through 11 now, are all in a cycle pattern. Again, we identified and created those Tier 1 intervention resources for general education use for English 9 through 12. And again, we focused on reading, writing, language usage, and behavior as well. And then we revised our standards-based rubrics again in grades 9 through 12. So now our rubrics are all standards-based, very task-specific in grades 6 through 12. And then finally, we created blueprints in Schoology for grades 9 through 12. So now we have complete blueprints 6 through 12 for all of our English courses. What we're working with this year with our literacy specialists, and we do meet with middle school every other week and high school once a month, the accelerated learning process. We are working through and making sure there's a good understanding of the standards-based rubric, the scoring and grading using the rubric. Virtual learning, of course, that's been huge for all of us. Digital as well as instructional resources. Schoology, making sure that all of our teachers are proficient in Schoology. Understanding data and how you take the data and then refresh instruction. And then finally, our work with Dr. Diana Carey through the Learning Grant, the Striving Readers Grant on the standards decoded. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've been able to do with her. Again, this is year 3. She's coming next week to work with our teachers in after-school workshops. I think they're full already, so we're really excited about that. She's doing virtual workshops. We've continued our work with her. Again, we're better understanding those college and career ready standards and how they work together. She got a chance before we went on our little virtual tour to come to some of our schools. And she actually worked with language arts departments at Crestwood, Thomas Johnson, Monocacy, Thurmont, Walkersville, and then she went to Catoctin High School, Thomas Johnson High School, and Tuscarora High. So she got a chance to actually sit, observe classes, work with the teachers, plan with them. They got access to her. So it was really pretty exciting back before, it was back in the fall. Our ELA teachers have received also through the grant additional resources from Thinking Core, so that all of our teachers grades 6 through 12 have those at hand to help support their instruction. And then we've had over 120 ELA teachers earn MSDE credit for their participation in the school-paced professional learning, as well as the virtual sessions during the summer that Dr. Carey did, We're also working so that they can get credit for the sessions that they're attending next week. And then she's coming back virtually one last time in December to work with our teachers as well. Do you have any questions for me?
Oops, sorry. Jay or Ray, there. Now you can get down. Okay, since it's animal share time. Jay or Ray, any questions?
This is more, I think, of a general question. And Karen, your question earlier about the diversity of authors and literature being used within elementary, I think it's applicable to middle and high as well. Reminded me of our conversation about the equity assessments that were occurring within the subject areas across the district. So just wondering if there's any additional information from the ELA perspective on an equity assessment. And clearly the literature being used and procured for our libraries are a portion of that, but just curious to hear from you about sort of that process of the equity scan within ELA as well.
Well, we've been trying to add more diverse texts and writers to our curriculum throughout. And what we did during the fall was we asked our teachers across the county 6 through 12 to suggest texts at each grade level that would add to our diversity library within classrooms. And they came up with great lists. And our intention is to get these books approved and then hopefully be able to provide them to schools. Then next summer, since we won't be working hopefully on virtual strategies as much, we'll be able to take these texts and infuse them into the learning cycles. So that's our hope. So it's a work in progress still, but we do have a list of books at each grade level that we'd like to get approved and move through the system. Yeah.
Following up on that, those will go through the regular approval system. So they'll be put out to the public and then come to our board docs.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hey, Jay, did you have anything?
What challenges do you have when we start bringing equity into our schools and bringing in different texts with teachers, with students? And if you have thought about those challenges, how have we overcome those challenges?
I'll start with, I got a chance to go to the National Council Teachers of English Convention. And one of the things that they really hit home with all of us is that students need to be able to see themselves in what they read. So that's kind of been our mantra this year, making sure that we're providing students the opportunity to read about people like them. So with that said, our teachers, you would be surprised how ready they are for this and how they are the ones who were able to curate those lists of books very quickly as to what they wanted to see happen in the classroom. So I think along with the fact that we're going to put these books through the approval process this summer, take them and put them into our curriculum cycles, I think PL will come along with that, and we'll be able to take and bring our teachers along with how you handle some of them with controversial topics in the classroom.
Mr. Mason, I see this kind of professional learning to be very much mirror what we've already done with our social studies teachers when they're handling tough topics. We would do that in conjunction with our equity team and lay that learning out. I do think that depending on the timeline as to when these are approved, and I'm not sure where we are with that, Sue Ann, but there may be some teachers that once the approvals occur might be able to go ahead and start using these texts. And the teachers would then be a smaller group that we'd be working with to try things out. Again, this is all going to depend on timing and what happens with the model this year. So everything's kind of COVID dependent in some ways. That in the professional learning, teachers who have already taken these things on would be a great resource for their peers. And I know Sue Ann and her team do that on a regular basis. So we would see that kind of unfolding that way if the timing works out.
I have one question. You said over 120 ELA teachers earned MSD credit for participation in school-based professional learning. So do you have an idea of what percentage of the secondary ELA teachers that is?
We have about 235 ELA teachers. So, golly, don't ask me to do math.
A little more than half.
Let me get my phone here. No. But we were really excited about the participation, and some of them have done all of the PL available to them. I mean, we've got some real Dr. Carey devotees around the school system. So, and again, like I said, I think we have a full house on 4 evenings next week. So we're excited about that.
Well, and part of they very much focus, like Sue Ann said, on the accelerated learning process. And so part of what these teachers, when they learn this and within their accelerated learning process, they're doing that job embedded professional learning, and they're sharing that learning with their colleagues. And so when they're together, they're actually sharing what they learned during that time to help the others to have that same level of capacity.
I think that's all I had. So if nobody else has anything.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ann. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I guess we could do a quick look ahead at future topics. Linda, do we happen to have what's up scheduled for next time?
I do. It'll be Schoology and personalized learning updates, and then local assessment updates that are being brought back from a request from the August 5th meeting.
Does that sound good?
Sounds very good. And I just want to make sure we've given you enough time to be able to compile the data from the local assessments.
So what exactly are you looking for, Ms. Yoho? Are you wanting to see where current performance levels are?
That was my thinking, is that if we were assessing all of the students at the beginning of the year, to see where they were at, I wanted to see some results and maybe be able to make some comparisons, but I want to make sure we've given you all enough time to get the data and analyze it.
Yeah, so I'll look over to Jen as far as Jen Bingman as far as the windows being closed in enough time. Will that be enough? Because you'll have to have documents in. Linda, what would be the deadline for them to have those in? It's probably going to be the last week in October. So I don't know if that'll run you too tight, Jen, and whether or not this might be something that should move to the December meeting.
So we closed the performance series window on October 16th. So we would have enough time for that, but the DIBELS window actually doesn't close until October 30th. Now we will be, like I said, with a strategic plan presentation, we will be providing that DIBELS data dive for that specific measurable goal. So if we're not including DIBELS and we're just specifically going to target the performance series assessment and then the kindergarten math assessment that they did, I think we can make it by that timeline. We should be able to have that ready to go by October 26th.
So everything with the exception of DIBELS, which would then be shared with the board at the strategic plan. Does that sound okay, Ms. Yoho?
That sounds good. Good. I think it just gives us an idea of kind of where our kids are at after, not being in school. Messed up last year, so I just kind of just a general idea. I think that's good.
Okay. All right.
I think we can do that deadline.
Okay. Sounds great.
Thank you. All right. And when is that, Dr. Carey, when is she coming next week? I didn't know if it was possible but if it's fall.
I can have Sue Ann send you over the information if you'd like.
All right. Thank you. I
Absolutely.
always learn a lot from those, and I don't know if it's already full being a virtual meeting or not, but anyway. All right. Anything else for the good of the group? Hearing nothing. The meeting is adjourned.
Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.